О, наверное, ну, я не знаю насчет того, стоит ли Zoom, стоит ли сейчас. Ах, смотри, как мы выглядим. Кто-то уже идет к нам. Привет.
We have two computers and one computer.
But everybody has their own account, so that's fine.
Okay.
The only thing I think we should, so we should make sure that nobody's talking, because that sound will go here.
Okay.
Tell people. And sound. So should I put sound? Do you think it's better if it go from there?
I think so.
Yeah?
I think it's much better than
Pasha, we should start. Hey guys, Leah, do you want to come here? Because I think we should. Yeah, I think will be a problem if people start to call during the talk.
No, we will make from this absurd piece, like someone just coming and we introduce.
Should we just put? Maybe we should post the art saying like "don't call" or something like that.
Like in hotels.
Yeah, like fucking don't call.
Come, but don't call.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so we can wait like a couple of minutes.
Look, we have the other angle.
Where's this?
Я не на том, да, вообще,
Uh,
другом.
А неважно, все будет видно. But I can't see you here. You should.
Exactly, that's what I mean.
That's maybe you're in a strange, but you may be in a strange, in a different, you're in the same Zoom, because if you're on that Zoom, I should see you.
Okay. Maybe I was just by mistake. Yeah. See these hours. Твой правильный.
Okay, no, but it's more people there.
Yeah, then let's use yours. Может быть, у тебя есть прямая ссылка?
Я не знаю. Сейчас, подожди, я посмотрю. Так. Ай-яй-яй. I can tweet that. Wait. You can see it on Twitter.
Когда заходишь?
I can just say okay online. So you can click on that Zoom. So did you find it? О, смотри, ну или здесь посмотри, где он. Митинг.
Нет, мне прислала Маша. Сейчас я попробую, но вы можете в принципе начинать.
Да? Окей.
Давай, пока ты представляешь, я, может быть, еще добавлю.
So we are slowly starting, and we have this hybrid event today with our guests. Oh wait, we should start recording probably, yeah? Okay, so then one more time, and maybe you introduce the guests too.
Now it's really
Now it's
Recording in progress.
Okay, so Pavel Arsenyev, and Museum of Care is discussion in the collectivity room.
Yeah, I'm very happy to see everyone offline and online. Let's maybe fix it like this.
Or maybe here.
Or maybe, yeah, since, yeah, right. And I want to also say hello and thanks to you, Nika, for this invitation to Museum of Care / the Gribbett Institute, as we everywhere announced insistently. Yeah, and I'm very happy that you, Kirill, will join our discussion as a London-based now author, curator, because lots of things changed quite a while after quite enough after our last presentations, last talks in St. Petersburg or somewhere else. Yeah, so the basic topic of our framework of our discussion, yeah, it's actually collectivity in printed matter, and also what it means, what by this collectivity could be provoking. I mean, some conflicts, of course, some grouping, maybe some creating some front lines, or even
actually constituting a new community.
Yeah.
Because when I met you, it was like quite a long time ago. I think it was like 15 years ago, maybe. Yeah,
Probably.
it was a very long time. So there was no like magazine or no platform for any of the new authors who was writing primarily in Russian. And then suddenly it's appeared out of nowhere. And that was amazing.
Well, to be honest, there was some context, and 15 years ago, a magazine already existed, but that was definitely like just emerging collectivity, which was not even united, for example, Moscow and St. Petersburg, because you was Moscow, I was from St. Petersburg, and it was just some small groupings of literary youth.
But I think this, and so correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this magazines that existed, it was countercultural magazines that belonged to the dissident culture of another generations. And they were like quite close groups, you know, who was in a way very elite. So it wasn't so easy to, so I'm like in the middle of this generation. So it wasn't so welcome for somebody from Perm to start to come and publish somewhere in St. Petersburg. This was actually not even very
Yeah,
possible.
before Marat Gelman moved to Perm, of course, it was a very abandoned place. But then we started to feel that we are not maybe that often invited to Perm. Well, if to speak seriously, this history of independent print, let's say, or dissident print, to come closer to terms, was starting again after Perestroika. Perestroika somehow satisfied, at least partly, at least illusionary, all these demands of new type of sociality, new types of what French people call sociabilité. So it started to be public. For example, Prigov has no more reasons to be published undergroundly because he was everywhere published, like in public magazines, also in Russian or American, in European, German, everywhere translations. He started even at some point before his last year of death in 2006, I guess. He started even to make some YouTube videos, which started to be distributed really in virus scale. So what I want to say that this kind of underground, which existed before Soviet era finished, this successfully or not, but in some measure was introduced in public scale after Perestroika. Then there was illusion or real situation of sort of exchange of opinions, political participation maybe, and so on. And then something started to happen again in beginning of Putin's era, actually. With Putin's era, some small groupings again started to feel that maybe not everything is so liberal, not everything is so possible in public sphere, and therefore all this activist group, as Vaina finally, but lots of them, they started to emerge with Putin regime. So it's like a mirror, I would say. And all the same with literature. So literary circles, which were still hoping, as we, for example, in late 90s, beginning of zeros, to be published in like big magazines, or not already governmental or like official magazine, but at least big, which has distribution all over the libraries. We started to feel not that invited. And therefore, in 2005, actually, more than 15 years ago, we created this magazine called Translit. So we call it in some ironical memoirs as an organ of disagree of philological education. So it was created on philological department, and therefore we demanded like more creative approach to literature, to literary criticism, to art, etc., which was not actually provided by university especially pedagogical one, which we were attending, with lots of other published theory. So therefore, it was necessary to rethink maybe these traditions of dissidency in printed matter. And this history starts somehow at 2005, I would say. It was also strengthened by some context, which we probably should mention, because already 2 years Что делать group exists, which was like first leftist artistic group in post-Soviet scale. Magazine, Moscow Art Magazine existed, created by Victor Miziana, also from, like, let's say, critical leftist.
Who was
cause.
in this collectivity
exactly.
group before you previously?
Yeah, maybe you remember some other important emerging points.
Well, I would say that
influenced
from my perspective at the time, which was more like coming from Moscow to St. Petersburg, nothing like this existed in Moscow. So there were some political groups available in Moscow, and there were some arts groups available there, but there was no connection between the two kind of strands. And what struck me at the beginning, I think that was in 2009 or 2010, something like this, when I started to kind of enter this circle in St. Petersburg. This is what struck me most, because I understood that this link between art and politics actually exists, and it exists it uses the platform of Translit, actually. So yeah, that's very important.
One more important grouping which existed in Moscow, I recall, it was ERAS, the Russian Socialist Movement.
Yeah, but that was more political, I would
That's
say.
true,
like
but lots of artists and future contributors
True.
of Translit, as Kirill Medvedev, Alexei Penzin, who also now in London, Vlad Safronov and Ilya Budraitskis, they were part of this political movement, but being artists, historians, or philosophers. And this was like let's say the most artistic political movement, which in good sense.
That's
Yeah, like so, like let's look at Russia as from far away, not trying to dig in. So for the people who is not Russian and don't know these names, so how does it happen that like I remember coming from West, I was living on West and just visiting Russia, and it looked to me like absolutely empty field. There was nothing, you know. And then I first met Kirill when he was reading Ronald Mandelstam. Roald, sorry. And then it was so strange.
Medvedev.
Yeah, Medvedev. I was like, really, wow, I can't believe it. Like, I was just like, who is this guy? I was like shocked.
That's true that a history of some emerging or re-emerging political and artistic dissidency, which started in zeros in Russia, was existed in particles. So it was completely disconnected, that's true. And not only in Moscow, in St. Petersburg, it was this important hub of Что делать, where we met also with different authors and so on. But we met in Что делать. Yeah, but there was not specialization, let's say, in sense of art. So leftist pole in literature didn't exist, but there was Skidan in St. Petersburg and Medvedev in Moscow. And maybe if some invention was actually could be assigned to Translit, I decided actually to combine these two prominent figures, including Katie Chukhrov, who was at the moment hesitating between different, let's say, philosophical and political interests. But then he started to be third, like patronizing or matronizing figure, and they, how to say, all of them, three of them, were sort of consultational council Soviet of Translit. So they somehow supported this new young leftist literary cause by their authority, by their publication, by their contributions, but at the same time not intervening too much, which is very important in this managing of generations.
But that's insane if you think about a country with 130 million people, yeah, and then you have like a free people.
No, I think what Pasha didn't mention, and I think he should have done this, is the university networks, because this is what
this is the fourth
layer.
layer.
Oh yeah, if you could.
No, continue.
No, I wasn't
student
there.
activities.
Yeah, there were lots of, but you should tell this story more than myself, because what I know is that there were people from Moscow State University. That was one rebellious group that joined Translit at some point, I think near the beginning.
Yeah, I see what I mean. Yeah, it's important, since I already named the magazine as an organ of philological disagree with like decana, I should mention that there's some other layer or grouping existed called Street University, which actually made us more acquainted with you, Nika, and which was a completely innovative form of meeting, talking, exchanging opinions, reading lectures, creating discussions in street, as an outcome of some political struggle for European university. So there was only one European university in Russia which has this title in St. Petersburg. There was not that bad in Moscow, maybe Nizhny Novgorod, somewhere else, but one of them had this title. And of course, Russian power, which was starting to be more and more fascist already in the end of, let's say, third Putin's term, after repressing this social mobilization of Bolotny protest, which to which we are probably approaching thematically, we started to, even earlier, we started to defend European University, which was official title, by creating different performances, discussions, and then suddenly it started regular form. So each Sunday in St. Petersburg, in some special walking street, we started to meet and actually read these poems, make these discussions with student activists, with philosophers, with politologists, and so on.
And that was like really different, constitute immediately a different way of, kind of reproduction of knowledge, because suddenly people will come on the street.
Yeah,
that was
Yeah,
it was very inspiring. And this somehow was in resonance with what then have been known as Bolotny protest. So actually we tried from other student and artistic side to create some accompaniment for social mobilization. And even during this Occupy movement, which also happened in Russia, not only in New York or wherever, there were so-called like street universities everywhere. So somehow street university was how to say, like sacrifice of its own success, because it wasn't never branded, and therefore even now we forget to mention it, and we combine directly student group with Translit, though actually this was like intermediate milieu environment in which artists, literators, activists, whoever met. And of course we made presentation there, but it wasn't like our only our circle. It was more politicized than maybe some purely artistic initiative. It has own column on demonstration. Street University has its own emblematics and everything. So it was almost anarchist syndicalist student movement, which then dissiluted in this huge social mobilization of 2011, 20, 13.
Oh, that's really cool. I forgot about that, but it's really put Russian situation in perspective with the global developments, like very quickly.
Yeah, so the moment was that everything in Russia was closing, so there was more governmental control, like more power structures emerging, and what Translit did, what this street university did at the time, was really to counter this, to counterbalance this oppressive movement. So I think that was crucial. And I don't think I've been there at the time, but when I joined, that was very liberating. This feeling from Moscow perspective, that was extremely liberating, because nothing like this existed in Moscow at the time, like nothing. And it was like this for me, coming to St. Petersburg, and you can see that there are people meeting here, meeting there. So all of this collectivity, for me, it's much more associated with St. Petersburg at the time, rather than with the capital city.
Yeah, that's true. Maybe because of
so the city contributed a lot.
City construction of public space itself. It was more imaginable and then imagined and realized in St. Petersburg, though Moscow version of Street University also happened to appear
Okay.
a bit later. They were meeting somewhere on this boulevard. I don't
I
remember
see.
which.
Yeah.
Yamatveev
Yeah,
was
yeah,
doing
yeah.
this, and
Yeah.
other people.
Mm.
Yeah. So anyway, this is true that we were always joking that thanks to absence of art budgets in St. Petersburg, we were more politicized and
Yeah.
more literary activists or like activists than just artistic, because youth in Moscow immediately appeared to face this like neoliberal, sometimes nice, sometimes not at all interface. And if they were invited to this neoliberal market of art, they were well paid and somehow started to associate themselves less and less with Russia. So it was like immediate lift to somewhere, you know. While in St. Petersburg, to some neoliberal paradise. While in St. Petersburg, there were no good flight connections, no market.
Are you speaking about now?
No. Now it's not uncomparable. But we approach it. So to finish this how to say, prizing good times, as Brecht would call it. Let's approach to this year of 2013 when social mobilization stopped. Putin was frightened, and first attack on Ukraine happened, and actually, annexation of Crimea, which changed a lot. And then war on Donbass, because today's topic is actually not old good times, but war and carnival. So starting from 2014, a lot of things changed in our editorial environment. So first of all, we were existing, let's say, and not only in St. Petersburg as well as Street University, but in different towns, and also each like editorial part in different cities had its own specificity. So in Moscow, it was mostly around theater. In Nizhny Novgorod, media, poetry, and theory. In Samara, it's philosophy, and Riga, it was always presentations like rape. So Translit was presented during rapes, actually. In Krasnodar, it were like activist art, Zip and like Translit fellows in Krasnodar were part of this Zip movement.
How many places was
there were numerous. Starting from this issue, we were to erase actually this list because it could bring harm. Now it's on the Western libraries which are listed. But it was really great network, and what is maybe even more important, created by own hands. So it were friends. It were like our same age, and we were not paying money. We were not like
so describe kind of short, but really precisely how is it happens that you have this institution that was run without any institution, more or less.
Because we were not.
Go on.
Because we were not actually trying to impose some knowledge in literature science or some general line in poetry or in literature, in actual literature. We were trying to organize exchange. So people who were interested to be published, of course with some filtering, but nevertheless, when they were published, we invite them to editorial board. So we had the rule that every person who published twice received an invitation to come to editorial board, and they have the same voice as chief editor or whoever. So it was really organized in horizontal. You was invited, and you didn't think so. Okay, we'll check it. How much time you was published? I remember more than 3. Yeah, I guess we discussed it.
But let's discuss it later.
We'll see. But the idea, maybe the he was also busy or something. But the idea is that people from province, from regions, let's say, they were very much interested in establishing their own circle, like with some Translit help and providing some materials, but also presenting text in their own manner. So they were borrowing some maybe authority because, of course, with time and in 10 years, we turned to be a sort of a counter institution. But nevertheless, on the play, they always added something on, and it was never controlled and never repressed or whatever. So, and therefore, they were interested to include more and more new authors in this magazine. And of course, we were oriented maybe by this left model, which was never only Moscow-based magazine. There was so-called Yugolev, and there was Lev in Nizhny Novgorod, and in that kind. So we were trying
How
to.
many places altogether? Like
Well,
5, 10?
I guess more than 10 cities, more or less regularly. Sometimes they were existing already, some collectivities, some circles which wanted to invite us, but to keep their own identity. For example, in Novosibirsk, it was rather, emerged already collectivity called Rich Port. There was like river port, harbor. And they were inviting us for dialogue, and maybe like regularly. Then we made some lectures in.
But who are we?
There are lots of well, we may see websites. The amount differs. So I would say that editorial board consisted of more or less 10 person.
Mhm.
Was always involved in technical preparation of the magazine. Then there was a wider circle of so-called collegium, red collegium, editorial collegium, among 20, 25, maybe by now 30, which were taking decisions. And there were moments actually when I was proposing some review of my own, and it was unrelated because like three
what?
others.
For example.
For example, I wrote. Okay, I wrote. It's not my article actually. It's my review of poems of Alla Gerbunova, which I proposed to publish. And then maybe someone was not happy with Alla's text, maybe with my review, but then 3 persons voted that they don't want to see it in the review, and it was like taken away from layout. There were different other conflicts, and which is important in collectivity, which created maybe different fraction in editorial board. And at some point, there were different poles existing, more activist, more direct speech movement, like Kirill Medvedev was representing it, Romana Sminkin, and others. While from other side, something like politicization of form happened. And maybe you may take some replica about this, because it was maybe closer to your poetics and your interest in literature, since it was Evgenia Suslova, Nikita Safonov.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to get into that much details, but I would say that what really fascinated me about the institution is that it was at the same time formal and informal. So for me, it was not actually clear sometimes who is taking part in the organization, because the organization was always there and wasn't there at the same time. And I really enjoyed this kind of flexibility of the group. Plus, what I really liked is that I don't exactly remember the year where you migrated from Russia, but I remember that what happened afterwards. So that Pasha, whom I always associated with Translit, was less and less involved with the magazine and with the circle. And that was kind of surprising for me, because I thought that the two are so interconnected, so that if you withdraw Pasha from it, it would collapse.
But it didn't.
It didn't. And it's only war that actually somehow paused the thing. But not his migration from.
Yeah, I should maybe comment a little bit. It started even before migration, with my let's say hesitations of whether come or not to come to presentation to Moscow, because of course the second big editorial grouping happened to be in Moscow, and though magazine is still announced as St. Petersburg based, of course it was very fast found very fast some fellows in Moscow. And starting from 2014, actually.
14.
I remember, because I wasn't that often in Moscow, and I somehow skipped to visit the capital, because we still call St. Petersburg like second capital, so why maybe the first, second. And starting from 14th, which just coincided with my temporary academic migration to Switzerland, but then I came back next year. But 5 years from 2014 till the very last moment, actually now still now, the Moscow editorial grouping exists absolutely independently. And for me, it was very big achievement. As for me, I remember once I came actually to Moscow, just by case, everything was organized by Nikita Sungatov, who was for a long time part of editorial board and represented Moscow grouping. I was commenting something because I still was doing layout, which is maybe also important to explain, to show how the model worked. And I was commenting something always, and then some young poet or poetess asked, like, but who is this guy? Why he's always intervening, demanding microphone? So, and I was so happy because the new generation actually of poets and contributors of magazine arise being completely unaware of the fact that there is some prehistory in St. Petersburg. They knew, of course, Moscow editor. They were in touch with him. Maybe they were just starting their way in literature, and therefore this was very important. But at the same time, there were disadvantages of this handmade, let's say, editorial. For example, we investigated with Nikita Sungatov that the very fact that editor, so-called issue editor, at the same time layouting, means that lots of decisions sometimes made because of technical reasons, like it's too difficult to include this poem, let's better just put it like this. You see, let's just drop it, or it's too much Andragman, or too much for example some experimental elements as graphics, for example. And normally it's a person who is responsible for layout is complaining of all this, right? And an editor insists, but since it was coincident in me, and I also tried to teach Nikita to do it the same. So I was sure it's our know-how. But then he pointed to the fact that, Pasha, some decisions are not that much discussed on mailing list, which we had and which you probably received. No. Okay, we will rehearse next time better. But actually it's just old form which not existing anymore, but previously, now it's Facebook,
not neutral. Mostly. That's for sure. So maybe I will just ask.
So just to finish, I wanted to say that this layout moment was very important. From one side, it's important not to pay money, not to outsource some technical reasons, to stay like root, to stay young, but at the same time, more and more like decision-making power could be accumulated in some purely technical things. So at some point, we started to delegate it to some young people who were eager to be part of editing.
So what I want to ask now, so when we talked before this conversation with you, Pasha, we were talking about how Translit become a part of this infrastructure of different groups. That's Kirill is part of one of them with this Свободное марксистское издательство. And how did you kind of position yourself inside of this quite complex system? That's actually
So since there was no like center and peripheria in our editorial board, then we also were not so much sensitive to borders of our community and easily entered in some collaborations with other centers or other circles. And one of the most important like collaborators were so-called Free Marxist Publishing, established by Kirill Medvedev. But then lots of people, including you, Kirill, started to collaborate and published at least 2 books, I guess, together.
Oh, I think, well, the whole story started, I think, in 2008 by Kirill Medvedev when he started publishing Pier Paolo Pasolini's poetry. And when I saw these books, which were made, they were handcrafted, so they were made by himself at home, basically. But they were just absolutely inspiring, just as the Street University was. And I happened to know Kirill Medvedev's partner with whom I worked at the time. And I just told her, well, it's so exciting, all these books, what he's doing. And she said, well, he's just sitting on his computer and he's doing it all by himself. I was like, okay, can we maybe meet and discuss something, because I had ideas about some books on film, stuff like that. And then we met, and I don't remember who proposed to have a book on Jean-Luc Godard first. I don't really remember. Maybe it was him, maybe me. But we started collaborating on this thing, and suddenly the enterprise, if I could call it that way, started growing a little bit, so expanding, and more people joined. And I think well, we started doing this Godard thing in 2008 or 9, maybe. Yeah, 9 maybe. We published, and I think Что делать helped us a lot, because they provided some funding for us to print like loads of copies. And we did,
How much? What did you talk about?
well, 500. It wasn't much, but I think, well, I didn't realize this at the time, but then I understood that this became quite popular, because we published, we made the PDF version available online, so it became quite widespread and across Russia, and that allowed us to travel to make different presentations, screen films, blah blah blah. So it was kind of a big thing, and I don't think I've checked this. I don't remember when I last checked it, but I think like 5 or 10 or 6 years ago, it was still kind of cited here and there. So because that was, I think,
I quote it in
You
PhD thesis, because it's only one publication which mentions this Eisler, Brecht.
Yeah, so then we made, after Godard, I think we made 3 or 4 books on cinema, and that coincided with the fact that the publishing house was expanding, and I think they started making like, I don't know, 10 books a year, which was quite a big thing at the time, because it looked like this. So they negotiated.
Who are they exactly?
Kirill Medvedev, I would say.
Yeah.
I think he was mainly involved with organizational stuff. Others, including myself, who were helping with particular things. So he managed to convince the Victor Serge library in Moscow, which was an underground kind of small community library. He convinced them to give us one room, like a tiny space. We bought the machine to cut the books, like with our hands. And I think there were shifts. So like 5 to 10 activists were involved, and we were just doing it like this. So for example, I'm free next Monday, so I'll come from say 11 to 5
and cut books
basically, and cut books really. And yeah, that was
I remember it was at some point, it was in the attic of Falanster,
the
bookstore also.
bookstore,
So it was always somewhere, in this Kafkian spaces, like in basement somewhere. And people who were like sympathetic, they were supporting and giving some resources. Sometimes it wasn't even money that important, but sometimes space, time, or force. And I guess, and this fact that a lot of really nice books were possible to publish only in this handmade, crafty way. It's a very important symptom of the fact that already like official publishing, though there was never like in Soviet era, some official publishing house, only one. This official field, let's say, of publishing already filtered something very important.
Pasolini, Godard, I don't understand. This is
you don't understand because you don't understand it from the West, but from Russian standpoint, it was rather
it was about the politicization of the arts.
It could be dangerous again, let's say, though they were published in Soviet era in Russia. And one of these, therefore asked about the year, one of these important particle again of inspiration was so-called craft series, which were published consciously on the paper
with them.
Exactly. So we established with Kirill Medvedev after he already started
the inspiration.
So therefore we started to publish on this kind of paper, which has title Craft. Not only to economize money because it was less expensive than proper white paper. Now it's more stylized, of course. but because we wanted to somehow underline the moment that books could be done by hands, handmade, and therefore maybe it should also change somehow the way of writing books, the way of writing poems and articles, because this sensitivity to material, we try to explain that actually it existed already during formalist era. What formalists are saying about techniques, even if they're using metaphors, like technique of writing skill, technique of prose, whatever, it means that they were already aware of the fact that instruments, so-called instruments of writing, somehow participating in our way of thinking. This is Nietzschean formula, but of course, Shklovsky, Eichenbaum, and Tynyanov were very much aware of this fact. They were not ready maybe to pronounce explicitly this techno-deterministic or techno-sensitive thesis, but at least materiality of signifier, this was the main thesis of formalists. Like, let's see what words not just mean, but how they look like, how they sense by tongue.
So tell now about the office, because
I have
this all these people who suddenly started to publish from like Perm, Kazan, I don't know who.
Well, we need either more time to quote them, to read them in few languages.
Let's call them.
Either say, this was very nice, boy, this was very nice, girl.
Yeah, but
there are lots of names. Yeah,
Lots of names.
each magazine, for example, as this last one, which was published in Russia last summer, and probably it's last because it's anti-war and it's not that easy now to distribute. There is 15 authors, which I may quote, name their names or whatever.
Most of them stay in Russia now?
Yeah, at that moment when we published, it was quite risky because there is only 2 pseudonyms in this issue. This is openly anti-war issue on level of theory or like critical literary critique or auto-critique, let's say, cultural critique, and poems itself. So if you will read just few first lines from here, since you know Russian, you will see that there is no way to hesitate whether it is like pro or contra, right? So it was also anti-war on the level of cultural production itself. These intuitions of craft and free Marxist publishing were still with us. So we decided to support, not to sell it, well, sell, but not to earn money for the editorial board, but to transfer all the income from this anti-war issue to Ukrainian colleagues, not to an Ukrainian army, but to Ukrainian creative workers who were actually contributors of our magazine during years, during decades. Yeah. And not only magazine, we also published, starting from 2015, we published Sergei Zhadan, Igor Bobarev, and other Ukrainian authors in the separate books. This was our gesture to respond to Russian aggression, to Putinist Russian aggression on Ukraine, by supporting them culturally, by highlighting their voices, the voices from Ukraine, though we maybe translate it, not everyone understands Ukrainian and Russian, but that was our clear editorial politics. And from 2015, when annexation of Crimea happened, till 2022, we tried to support not only by words, but by deeds, and also not only cultural, but like very last tragic moment economically. Though it maybe wasn't that big foundation, whatever, but it was important and also risky actually for our subscribers. Therefore, we couldn't also risk by their freedom because it's prohibited in Russia to support Ukrainians. But at least to gather some money and transfer to our comrades in Ukraine. Yeah, so it was very important to continue this reivindication, not only on the level of words and all this lamentation, but on the level of cultural, maintaining this cultural infrastructure. And yeah, some gestures like this, which started to be political at the same time.
Yeah, so can you tell a little bit about what is happening to Translit now, and what is the, like last year, and what is the link today between Translit and Museum of Care. So do you have any kind of specific plans for collaboration? Something
Yeah.
like this?
I guess I will start from first part of question, and then
Okay.
this re-emerging or emergent link between Translit and Museum Care, you will tell more. So after the war started, we published this magazine. It was still before mobilization started, because after mobilization started, if you protest, you go to the front. So you're arrested and like become to recruited for the army. So it was still possible to make some cultural events against war, criticize an aggression, and on the public level, low risky. Boris Klushnikov, who was to join us today, he read last lecture in New Holland Institution after mobilization started, and immediately sat on the train for Exile into Kazakhstan, and then finally now he is in France. we so this is
his way of saying goodbye to
yeah, exactly. This is
Poland.
Expressive, very much remarkable transition, because a year after this issue, which was risky but still possible, we already presented the first Translit published in Emigration and thematizing this new existential and historical condition. And we were presented it with Boris as well, actually with you. We presented this anti-war issue when it was still published in Russian. But next summer in Marseille, in collaboration with Centre International Poésie Marseille, we published already in Marseille this issue, which has title Sense in Emigration, which means, of course, not prize and emigration itself, but transformed condition of distribution of sense. How some meaning of words start to be migrant, you know, or working migrant even, because now every word which you pronounce could be understood differently, and it depends on so-called geoposition of speech, as I propose to call it. Because if you say something in Russian, it's super risky, it's super like existential price, existential stake is incredible. But at the same time, when you pronounce something, again, the word here, which is obviously not that risky, you should pronounce it in English or in French or in German. So paradoxically, both of these parts of the editorial board and our authors started to be deprived of words. This was the title in Russian, but already in Latin, больше нет слов, which means no more words. So we started to be deprived of words in Russia because of military censorship, somewhere because of so-called censorship of grief, as I could call it, because as you may imagine, any kind of cultural events, maybe including this one, is not that invited by those who are in much more depressive situation because of relatives, because of like, I mean, not just immigration, not just even exile, but being refugee. It's war still now, even several of them. And therefore we try to thematize this transformed, mutating condition of distribution of sense, of voicing something, of enunciation, which somehow corresponds to our new historical and existential.
So where is this community at the moment? Where is this
quite big part of this community in France, and I was never in the same city with Kirill Medvedev and Boris Klushnikov, because they were Muscovite. I was from St. Petersburg. So now this summer we spent in the same city and made few events on the base of CPM institution. Now Boris moved to Paris, Kirill to Brussels, so we are still not that settled, but at least we are in Europe. We may struggle discursively, at least maybe organize some circles of support here, and
So maybe then I will ask you the last question, because we are already like close. And then
about
you can
the collaboration.
the collaboration. So what is fascinating for me is that it's all about physical objects. You know, the whole story is almost like a Russian fairy tale. You know, it's all about to something. You know, some magic object, some kind of paintings. That is the magazine. You know, it's all distributed, but then finally you have to do like physical work. It's like you described.
It's like proof. It works like proof, because maybe no one actually hold them that much.
Or maybe so now
you
like
carry some with you.
That's true, but
Yeah, so like you describing your participation as a physical labor. Yeah. So Museum of Care was born during, like the idea was born during COVID when David and I was, actually it was a comment on Marat Gelman blog post. That Marat Gelman wrote that, you know, oh, like all these like empty spaces now in COVID, and maybe it will be empty after because people don't need to go back to office. How about like we, cultural production, you know, people will take care of them, and then we will create like, you know, galleries and so on and so forth, you know. And we discussed it with David, and we were like, so how would the spaces actually could become a really care spaces without Marat Gaiman taking care of all of it?
Take care from.
And then we come up with this like the description of like this museum that doesn't have.
We should show, I guess, this nice installation.
Yeah, and also this one.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so then and actually these two exhibitions, apartment art exhibition, it's the first time when we started to do anything in physical space, because then after we wrote this article, very soon after David died, and then I was staying alone during COVID. And then Museum of Care was this only community that I would kind of was constantly in touch, but it's always virtual. Most of the people I never saw in my life, there was some kind of phantom on the internet. And so maybe when
that was also during the
that
pandemic.
was during pandemic, yeah, because they died 2020, and that's in February. So that was the whole year or more than a year. I don't remember, when there was really strong lockdown. And that's how like all of this people and, you know, mailing list and so on was born. So, and then we met with Sasha, with Pasha, and then I was like, wow, and I started to think about this physical magazine. And we were thinking to publish magazine of David Graeber Institute. And we started to talk, and so the idea is just to try to print maybe one thing together and then see how it goes. Maybe do some publishing house. You do some also buy this machine and started to cut things. Like, yeah.
No, this physical participation in creating cultural objects is nice, but I guess the very term publishing house is outdated. So now it works in more hybrid way of collaboration. Like we have time now to meet in London. We meet, we talk, and just think a second for what kind of this event, like hybrid event, we have now, because it physically happens here, but at the same time it's broadcasted, it's recorded, and it's not the main point that we're here. The main point that we're talking. And maybe this is a new type of projects which will be in the future more and more numerous.
Yeah, it's but I don't know. So it's also was really important, like again, like a ritual, that you have this physical object, and then around this object you have this sequence of events and steps that was, you know, organized.
They're definitely organizing us after being organized.
Yeah, exactly. But there is many forms available. Like yesterday, I was talking to the guy who started the Kickstarter. So now he's doing a new project that is basically more or less collective publishing project. This is like, sounds really cool, you know, and he wants to publish David's collectively, because for the last, I don't know, 7-8 years of his life, he had like almost all the books that he was writing was with somebody else. He was writing Meitip and Hasim, with me, with Angro, with some other people. He started project, and so, and he has like a file with like books that I would like to write. And so I was like, okay, cool, you know. So like we would talk with this person, and maybe we can do some projects around that, you know, some publishing houses of non-existing yet book, like open source book production.
Yeah, but since the event of hybrid nature, let's maybe try to make it even more open to those who are here as well, and maybe some round table or questions or whatever. Just.
So maybe we should introduce Leah, because I'm always like, is it okay? Yeah. Okay. So
Hi. I'm actually not really used to being on this side of the camera. It's too late to protest, I guess. Already caught. Well, I'm here because I was making a film about Translit, so which is pretty close to being finished and will be released. And it's actually a little bit trying to resist the nostalgia of hearing the description of all this years. But what do I have? Yeah, I mean, it feels like perhaps not appropriate, but I can't completely deny it. I didn't come with anything concrete to say.
It's too close, maybe.
Well, I'm also just flummoxed
Yeah,
by the position, the reverse,
I'm
the
so
reversal. No, it's fine. You can go around, maybe something.
So,
Maybe I can ask a question.
Yeah.
Which follows your last question, Nika, which is this idea of like collective writing, because we spoke a lot about that kind of infrastructure, which is collaborative or creates a collectivity around almost like really infrastructural. But then you were speaking, Pavel, about this like materiality of the very like writing process and how this also affects the form. And I was thinking, is there also another layer of collectivity behind a magazine making like this, which is completely decentral, which also really affects the way how maybe this idea of writing as an individual sitting in a room with your notebooks.
Yeah.
This also is broken by this kind of collectivity.
Well, lots of things were already pronounced before us by Brecht, for example, who was insisting that you need to think by collective or through collective. Мыслить коллективом. It means that at some point I already noticed this metastase on myself because I wasn't able to start with dissertation, for example, but I was very inventive in proposing articles like you should write about this, you should write about this, you should write about this, and we'll call it like this. And at some point I understood that it's not a problem, it's not a problem of production, but our like heritage. And I started, I tried to keep this, to hold this achievement and never resisted of the thinking through collective. But at the same time, we see that contemporary cultural production is not that inviting maybe to this collective form of writing. They always insist on creating CV, personal CVs, and so on and so forth. There was other author, Benjamin, who was insisting that some forms, like novel, for example, is bourgeois because it's created by a solitary individual in some closed room. And I like this kind of criticism of this cultural form. And he was insisted that maybe newspaper, some collective form of writing, or at least like more collective form of writing should be introduced and understood as a new ethos, right? And this is actually my research interest, but at the same time, I'm trying to introduce some of these intuitions into our practice.
I mean, I thought it was also a beautiful moment where you described here this idea of like you started a project, you didn't even remember who came up with the idea. It's almost like it's complete dissolution. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah, that's actually true. Yeah. And I think that there were different kind of approaches to different books for sure, but it all started with like with this spark of like, I don't know, just meeting each other and being inspired by just the idea. So I think most of the people around Translit and around the publishing house in Moscow shared the same kind of ideal.
Yeah, some habitus, I would say. That it's not just ideal because it was incorporated. It was real habitus of collective writing. And lots of things which now we are presenting here, both of us, also male, white, etc., actually were invented by lots of other people who were at the same time artists, political activists, maybe sometimes consciously hiding their names for like making to emerge this sort of collective authorship. And of course, it's very important part. Any kind of cultural resistance, let's say.
Plus, I think Pasha already mentioned this. It was very important, the fact that it was all unpaid work. So that was very important. So people dedicated their time, their spare time to do something, and they were not paid for that.
If they were interested and saw some sense of this as their own, with some small clause, except those who worked as proofreaders or translators sometimes, especially we tried to. So we understood it as if you have some symbolic income, let's say, and participate in magazine, then probably
poor.
it should be a criteria. Yeah, you should stay poor, or at least this should be a criteria of your participation. But if you are demanded, if someone asks, I mean, to translate, proofread, or layout, when it wasn't me already, but yeah, some invited person, we decided that this kind of participation, which is not leading to a symbolic capital acquisition, this should be paid by obvious money. But yeah, what was important, and also combine like parallels us to Miziana's magazine, Moscow Art Magazine, which existed in the same free of honorarium, let's say, conditions for 30 years, and still. I guess I borrowed this life hack from because first of all, we have no money, of course, but then I understood as author of Moscow Art Magazine that it was much more important to be published in this magazine than to receive like some small fee. No one could pay more than some amount, and this has started to be really important criterion. So
yeah, so I also want to say that for David, the idea of collectivity and dialogue was crucial. So he took 2 books with him to Madagascar. That was Dostoevsky and Bakhtin. Both was about collectivity and about dialogue as a primary form of constitute personality. So the human being doesn't exist as a object, as a fetish. They exist when they talk to somebody else, and like in their process and not in a film. So I think we should just close
it's a very good point which we may finish the discussion of the.
But maybe if somebody want to participate and ask something.
Right. Voice.
Yeah. We actually, do we have something? No.
Yeah.
Hey, so we.
Hi, may I ask a few questions, because I thought this. You hear me?
Yes, totally. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much for organizing this event. I wish I was there. So I had a few questions while listening to this fascinating conversation. And first of all, I was wondering whether you think that the collective aspect is a product of a specific worldview or of a specific epistemology that does not necessarily exist in this part of the world, in the UK, in the US, in Ireland, where I'm based. And the other thing that I was curious is, what is the vision of Translit now that it's published in this part of the world? How do you envision its future?
Yeah, thank you for this question. I guess this collectivity, collectivist, maybe even vision of co-authorship, which again was tested and discussed very much in late 20s and 30s by Soviet and German authors, and not only. This was already tested, so we knew their texts, and we, of course, were oriented by their text. But as Kirill described it in very remarkable terms, it somehow sparked. It's emerged like accidentally, I would say, just because we had maybe enough money for publishing. We used this paper, which started to be a title of the series. Just because we had no money for paying fee, it started to be collective or even collectivist enterprise. And just because we're trying to economize even like on post publishing, how do you call it, postpечатная обработка, we started to be involved corporally and like, if you want, in this object, which started to be part of our body, by the way, since now I would say, how do you call it, позвоночник. Spine is kind of already in correspondence with this weight, and yeah, it's already a part of the body. But nevertheless, it's not just comic, anecdotic comment. I want to say that it was not so much imagined or like ideologically presupposed as introduced from some practice. So therefore, I see that it was habitus of collective cultural work rather than some plan idea which we try to realize. And to your second question, I should say it's actually very, very close to the first one, because now it's because of this physical dissolution of editorial board around too many countries, and at the same time small groups gathering in EU. We need to reimagine how we exist, like practically, not just on the level of slogan, though even slogans now influenced by our physical or geographical position, right? But at the same time, this habitus was very much changed by immigration and war, and will be changed. So we need to imagine new bodies. Let's say maybe part of this grouping will make us join with Museum of Care, maybe with your reading group, maybe something else. But it definitely now it's dismantled body, and it should be recombined anew, you know, like Frankenstein. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Mutual bodies.
I would maybe add to the first question. I think that when you are asking about different contexts, I think it's very important, in my perspective, at least, that it all happened partly, at least partly, because of the lack of infrastructure, lack of funding, for sure, because in the noughties, I don't think it really existed there, like in St. Petersburg or in Moscow. And the landscape was just very, I mean,
Unfriendly.
yeah, unfriendly, I would say. So it so happened that only independent initiatives like this could emerge and could be, and this could, there was no funding available and no infrastructure to rely upon. So this is how it all happened.
Yeah, this is very good thesis. Something could emerge as collectivity in culture because it was not pre-existing framework or
You have
also
to do
sponsored
it on your own.
Yeah, so we were, if also on the one condition, if you were not tending to earn money only in culture, then you had this spare space, spare time, which you could invest in creating some new groups, some new circles, and therefore this condition is not existing anymore.
Yeah,
because Russian is not existing anymore in the same sense.
Or maybe something will re-emerge now just because of the level of control that the government has inside Russia. So I think new forms of collectivity might emerge at the moment just because of this kind of oppression.
But do you see something like this? Do you see something like a new underground?
Yeah, I should actually mention, because the question was how it exists now. And apart from this like emigrant edition, which we call like e-position, because emigrant exile in Europe at the same time, there's still Moscow part of editorial board, which exists under in Moscow under some underground condition. They are reading poetry, like openly announcing them leftist poetry, like reading or something like this in bunkers. And there are some interesting
What to say? What
I will show you in bunkers, like really, because
Yeah,
I will explain. So they have a new interesting how to say, like media condition of gathering. For example, they could announce where and when, but they never record or never broadcast as we, because lots of trolling and lots of then people could, and this is risky, and therefore it could be also be like how to say, like criminal traces, you know, and from the standpoint of Russian law, and therefore they still exist. And Alexei Masalov, who is the editor of poetic section of our magazine, is still providing some criticism, organizing poetical reading in Moscow, risking every time. Previous reading, for example, were annullated because Prigozhin's march on to Moscow and introduction of state of exception in Moscow. It was the same date. Now they announced 5th. So reading,
you have like poetry readings, and then there's armed mutiny in Russia, and it's all being cancelled.
I may read their last announced just to understand how this underground looks like now in Russia, and if it's possible. Of course, it's super risky, but it sounds like this. 11th of November, read readings of unconventional poetry will happen. In the program, experimental poetry from varied anthologies to visual media hybrids, which are resisting stereotypic understanding of text, and at the same time semantic disposition of authority discourses. So it's still, again, political and aesthetical revindication. With these poems, you may hear how authors are working with emancipation of objects, eco and media poetics, gender, political problematics. So I don't know how it's possible, but when you came and saw our group, you also was not prepared for this, right? So maybe we changed the roles now, and we are, after this 15, 20 years being in exile, we couldn't imagine the thirst for resistance, for cultural making something by your own hands, which exists obviously even in country which is completely fucked up, let's say. And this is our common opinion. It's not that easy to exist. And therefore we try to introduce some theoretical considerations on which conditions speech exists in this bunker space. It exists in English, this word bunker, no? Like shelter? Shelter. Sorry. My English. Yeah, it's a literal underground. I make show also photos.
I think underground is because I was thinking like it's literally something.
Yeah, and literally,
Because it's a bomb in Moscow. Wow, I need something.
That's very also.
Something news that I didn't see. Like everything.
Should we reduce now?
There's also a very remarkable place where they're making these readings. It has title "Только сами," like only ourselves, okay? Which means obviously that it's self-organized.
It also looks like rape, like rape during COVID. It's like that in London.
Yeah.
People would just like send
So
on the phone, like come here.
I wouldn't prize war and emigration as a sort of an instrument for reimagining cultural space, but it definitely is sort of inventivity which comes from reintegration of like normal culture and normal literature. As Shklovsky once said, the war started to estrange everything on its own. Like we didn't need any more initiative from artists like this Demiurge who is bringing his vision of estranged vision, right? The war itself changed the function of objects, the social relationships, and we should only transcribe and of course introduce some new cultural form which are appropriate to this. So definitely this resistance continues.
So let's see if it's more questions because we're already like 12 minutes.
Yeah. Do we have more questions here or there?
So maybe I will wrap up.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. So
Thank you for invitation.
yeah, thank you for coming. And so hopefully we will figure out some kind of collaboration.
Yeah, definitely.
Right now.
Right now we will sign an agreement and so on. But yeah, that was like really interesting. And it's definitely part of my own life, like meeting Pasha some long time ago and seeing how everything unfolded was like really fantastic. Yeah. Congratulations, by the way, for and
we'll talk about next point probably later, but yeah, we have some reasons to reappear in London in December, January at some point.
okay, cool. Bye bye, everybody.
Thank you so much.